We improved the bone density of a 70-year-old woman from this to this in just 12 months. And in this episode, we'll show you how. Because 1 in 2 women and 1 in 4 men over 50 will break a bone due to osteoporosis. Yet most are never told they can do anything about it. Welcome back to the Senior Health Podcast, where East meets West to reveal the daily rituals that protect your memory, mobility, and strength after 60. I'm Dr. Grant, and with me is Japan's oldest doctor. And today we're challenging one of the most paralyzing myths in modern aging. That bone loss is permanent, and that your future must now be shaped by fear. Because for too long, osteoporosis has been treated like a sentence, not a signal. A message that says, slow down, when in truth, it may be your body's call to rise. Every week, I meet patients who've been told their bones are crumbling and that the only options are injections, side effects, or silence. But that's not medicine, that's surrender. And today's guest knows this better than anyone. He's over 100 years old. He still walks daily, still climbs stairs, and still helps patients rebuild what they thought was lost, using the power of food, tradition, and focused movement. No one is better equipped to walk us through this journey than Japan's oldest practicing doctor, Dr. Shigeaki Hinohara. It is truly an honor to have you back.
That's a thoughtful introduction, my friend. I'm honored to be here, especially for a topic that quietly affects so many, yet is often misunderstood. Osteoporosis is more than just a medical condition. It's a crossroads. The moment someone hears those words, "Your bones are thinning," they often imagine wheelchairs, falls, and lost independence. But that vision is not destiny. Today we'll explore how bone strength is not only maintainable, but rebuildable, naturally, and often faster than people think.
That alone is going to surprise a lot of people.
We'll talk about what actually causes bone loss, how food and movement interact with bone metabolism, and why some of my patients in Japan are still gaining bone mass into their 70s and 80s. Most importantly, I hope to show that even small changes, done consistently, can create very big shifts. If you've ever felt powerless about your bones, I ask you to stay with us, because what we share today may change what you expect from your body and your future. And let us know in the comments where you're listening from, because bone health isn't just personal, it's also cultural, and your environment can shape what your body needs most.
Wait, you're saying that even people in their 70s or 80s can build bone again without medication?
Yes, but only when we look at the whole person. Bone is not built in isolation. It is built in response to a life. We look at nutrition, yes, but also inflammation, digestion, hormone balance, and even how you breathe and sleep. Bones do not care about your calendar age. They care about your signals, and the signals we send through our habits can be either destructive or regenerative. I've worked with patients well into their 90s who have reversed bone loss, not because they are lucky, but because they followed a framework that speaks the body's language. That is what we'll lay out today.
It's powerful to hear you say that, because most people never hear it at all. In fact, when my own mother got her diagnosis, I remember the look on her face. It wasn't fear of the condition itself. It was the fear that her life was suddenly shrinking, like she had to be more careful now, more fragile, less herself. But what I saw in her over the next year, once we took a different path, was something I'll never forget. Her spine stabilized, her strength came back, and more than anything, her confidence returned.
It gives hope, John. Sometimes it just takes one comeback to prove the diagnosis isn't the end. It's the beginning of a different kind of strength.
And that's why I want to start with the question that terrifies most people first. Is osteoporosis actually reversible, or is that just wishful thinking?
It is absolutely reversible, but not by attacking the bones alone. You must understand, bones are the record keepers of the body. They store the imprint of how you live, what you eat, how you move, how much sunlight touches your skin, and even how much stress you carry. If those inputs change, the output, your bone density, can change too. But medicine often isolates bone as a separate problem rather than seeing it as the consequence of deeper imbalances. We focus on calcium and drugs, while ignoring inflammation, gut health, muscle loss, and sleep. This is why many people stay stuck. They are treating symptoms, not systems. When you support the whole system, the bones respond.
That's such an important point. We forget that bones are alive. They're not static. They're constantly being broken down and rebuilt.
Yes, and the rate at which that happens depends on your internal chemistry, your hormones, your habits. In Japan, we've studied seniors who continue to increase bone mass into their 80s, not because of one miracle supplement, but because of their lifestyle. They walk daily, they squat, they cook at home, they eat fermented foods that help nutrient absorption, and they rarely sit still for long. But these practices aren't seen as medical, they're seen as normal. And that cultural expectation makes all the difference. We're not aiming to fight osteoporosis, we are restoring the signals that bones were always designed to respond to. And the earlier you start, the better. But even at 90, it's not too late. The real key is consistency, not intensity, because bones, like people, grow stronger with steady love, not panic.
That word, consistency, it might be the most underestimated medicine we have. But how do we keep people motivated, especially when early changes aren't always visible?
You make the invisible visible. Use scans, strength tests, balance markers, anything that shows progress, and surround them with encouragement. The community around you can reinforce health more powerfully than any pill. We must create habits that feel nourishing, not punishing.
That reminds me of a patient of mine who was doing everything right, but felt defeated because her follow-up scan showed only a small improvement. And yet her balance was better, her posture had improved, her energy was up. I told her, your bones are healing, even if the numbers are shy. Because those internal shifts often come before the data catches up. So let's dive into the how. What are the real root causes that most people, and even many doctors, miss when it comes to bone loss?
There are 4 I see most often, and all of them can be overlooked if we're only treating numbers. First, poor digestion. If your gut can't absorb minerals, your bones starve, even on a perfect diet. Second, low muscle mass. Muscle is the messenger to bone. It tells it to grow, to strengthen, to hold. When we lose muscle, especially after 60, we lose that mechanical signal. Third, chronic inflammation, often driven by blood sugar spikes, hidden food sensitivities, or poor sleep. And finally, stress. Cortisol, the stress hormone, directly interferes with bone building. And too many seniors live in a state of constant alert. Each of these factors can chip away at your skeleton quietly until one day you're told you've suddenly developed osteoporosis.
That really hits home. I've seen patients improve their nutrition, take their supplements, and still not improve because they're living on antacids or sleeping 4 hours a night. It's like trying to water a tree while the roots are dry.
Exactly. We must look below the surface. In Japan, we often see digestion as central. If the gut is weak, the whole body follows. Fermented foods, simple meals, and warm liquids help keep the digestive fire alive. But beyond the gut, I've seen dramatic turnarounds when someone improves sleep, even just by 1 extra hour per night. And muscle, we must treat muscle like a prescription. Even simple strength exercises, done at home, so with intention, are enough to send bone-strengthening signals. But it's not about gym memberships or heavy weights. It's about frequency and form and protecting joints while loading the spine.
And what about hormones? I imagine those play a role too?
Very much, especially for women after menopause and men as they age. Hormones are the silent architects of our bones.
That's such a critical layer. I think many people are afraid to even ask about hormones. They fear it means drugs or invasive treatments. But what I hear from you is that even small hormonal shifts, when supported naturally, can create big ripple effects. And that's hopeful. It gives us options. It means bone loss isn't a mystery. It's a message. And with that in mind, let's look more closely at the gut. Because if digestion is the foundation, we need to understand how to rebuild it.
In Japan, we believe digestion begins before food even enters the mouth. It starts with how you breathe, how you sit, and even the mood you bring to the meal. If you eat in a rush, while distracted or tense, your stomach won't produce enough acid or enzymes to break food down. That's why many seniors, especially those on antacids or with chronic stress, lose the ability to absorb calcium, magnesium, and protein.
That explains a lot. I've had patients frustrated that their labs don't improve despite a perfect supplement routine, and now I see the issue may be upstream.
When this happens, we often see low bone density even in people with a healthy diet. So we train patients to eat slowly, chew thoroughly, and include small amounts of fermented foods like miso, natto, or pickled vegetables. These not only aid digestion, but also feed the microbiome, which in turn supports immunity, inflammation, and nutrient delivery. It's a quiet system, but it governs everything downstream, including bone health.
That brings up something I see a lot here. Older adults afraid to eat fermented foods. They think they're too strong or strange or will upset their stomachs. But from what you're saying, they may actually calm the gut if introduced gently.
Yes, and gently is the key. Start with a few spoonfuls alongside warm rice or soup. Make it part of a calm, familiar meal. The goal is not to shock the body, but to awaken its original design. And once the gut starts responding, with better digestion, less bloating, more regularity, you've opened the gate for better nutrient uptake. I often say, you are not just what you eat, you are what you digest. And digestion, like bone, improves with practice. We must treat the gut as we would a delicate instrument, finely tuned by rhythm, not force. This becomes especially important after 60, when enzyme production slows and the margin for malabsorption grows. But the upside is, with even a few changes, many seniors notice a difference in weeks.
And if someone's already dealing with gut issues, say acid reflux or IBS, how should they start?
Carefully and with observation, remove irritants, reintroduce support like bitters or enzymes, and avoid ice-cold drinks that can suppress digestive fire.
That's incredibly useful and practical, because a lot of gut advice can sound either overwhelming or too generic. But what you're offering is simple, actionable, and respectful of how the aging body works. And that gives people something more than just hope. It gives them direction. I think now's a good time to look at food more directly. What are the nutrients that really matter for building bone? And what foods deliver them best after 60?
After digestion, the next critical layer is nourishment, real nourishment, not just calories. Calcium is only one piece of the puzzle. Bones are also made of collagen, magnesium, phosphorus, zinc, and vitamin K2, each with a distinct role. For example, K2 helps direct calcium to the bones instead of the arteries. Yet it's missing in most Western diets. You'll find it in natto, a fermented soybean dish, but also in certain aged cheeses and pastured egg yolks. Magnesium, which supports over 300 enzymatic reactions, is needed to activate vitamin D. Yet it's depleted by stress, coffee, and certain medications.
That's something we rarely screen for, and yet it may be the bottleneck in people doing everything right and still seeing no gains.
And then there's collagen. Without it, bones become brittle. You can support it through foods like fish skin, chicken broth, and gelatin-rich cuts. So when someone tells me they're taking calcium, I gently say, your bones speak a more complex language.
That's such a good way to put it, because the way bone health is often framed here, it's just take calcium and hope for the best. But clearly, it's a team effort, a nutritional orchestra, and we've been giving people just one instrument.
Exactly, and too much calcium, especially without K2 or magnesium, can even be harmful. I've seen seniors develop kidney stones or vascular issues from isolated calcium supplements. The body was designed to receive nutrients in a balanced, food-based form. That's why I always emphasize food first, supplements second. It's not about rejecting modern medicine. It's about respecting the body's logic. Foods like sardines, dark leafy greens, sesame, natto, and broth are gentle but powerful. They build not just bone, but tissue, blood, and calm, all of which influence recovery and resilience. And when you eat with that kind of intention, your whole system begins to respond.
So food becomes a form of instruction, not just fuel.
Yes, every bite tells your bones whether to hold, to break down, or to rebuild.
It's profound how reframing nourishment this way restores not just health, but dignity. Because now, people don't just follow rules, they engage. They sense what their bodies are asking for and respond with care. That's the kind of shift that sustains. Which brings us naturally to movement, because food builds the materials, but motion sends the blueprint. So what kind of exercise actually helps bones grow stronger, especially after 60?
John, before we move into movement, let me first offer something for our vegetarian and plant-based friends, because many of our listeners may not eat meat, and bone strength is still within their reach.
Absolutely. And they deserve strategies grounded in science, not guesswork. The word is yours.
While collagen itself is animal-based, the body can synthesize it when given the right amino acids, such as glycine, proline, and lysine, found in legumes, tofu, and seeds like pumpkin or sunflower. Supporting nutrients like vitamin C, which helps turn those amino acids into collagen, can be sourced from bell peppers, citrus, or kiwi.
And would you say vegetarians need to supplement more carefully? Or can they still get what they need through food alone?
That depends on the individual, but food first is always my starting point. Fermented soy products like natto not only offer K2, but also support the gut, which improves overall absorption. Even without meat, a varied intentional diet can build strong bones. It just requires more attention to pairing foods and tracking nutrients. That's the key. Not dogma, but balance. Once that foundation is laid, then we can move to the other half of the equation, motion.
And this is where so many people, even doctors, get it wrong. We tell seniors to stay active, but we don't define what that means. So they walk in a straight line or pedal a bike or stretch. And while all of that supports general health, it doesn't trigger the specific stress bones required to grow stronger. I've had patients who exercise daily but still lost bone density, simply because the signals weren't targeted. That's why I want to dig into the details here. What kind of movement actually matters for skeletal health? And how can people over 60 integrate it without risk?
Motion tells the bones they're needed, but not all motion is equal. The body responds to pressure, gravity, and force, which is why passive activities like swimming, while excellent for the heart, don't send the right signal to the skeleton. What we need is gentle impact, loaded joints, and multidirectional stress. Walking uphill, carrying groceries, stepping onto uneven terrain, even standing from a chair without using your arms, repeatedly. These create microstrains that encourage the bones to reinforce themselves.
That's an empowering reframe, that everyday life can become medicine if approached intentionally. But what about those who are already fragile? How do we keep them safe while introducing that kind of load?
We start where they are. For some, that might mean resistance bands in a chair. For others, climbing stairs with support. The goal isn't intensity, it's consistency. If the body feels safe, it adapts. And just like muscle, bones improve with the repetition. That's why we often recommend 3 short movement sessions per day rather than 1 long one. Especially for seniors, this pattern respects their energy while still stimulating growth.
So you're saying frequency matters as much as the type of exercise?
Yes, because bone cells respond to novelty and disruption. Long walks on flat ground may feel productive, but without variation, the skeleton tunes out. It's the surprises, the shifts in weight and direction that wake the system up.
That reframes movement from routine to relationship. We're not just burning calories, we're speaking directly to our biology. And it explains why even short bursts, done mindfully, can yield results that defy expectations. I've seen patients regain stability, posture, even confidence, just from re-engaging their legs. So that leads me to the next layer, because if bones are listening to our movement, they're also listening to our hormones.
Exactly, and the hormonal cues are often the most overlooked yet most powerful. Estrogen, testosterone, DHEA. These are not just about reproduction. They regulate the very cells that break down and rebuild bone. After menopause, for example, a woman's bone breakdown can speed up by as much as 20% in a single year. That's not weakness, that's biology calling for new support. For men, a gradual drop in testosterone also undermines skeletal strength. But the solution is not always medication. Often it's lifestyle, better sleep, less stress, and movement that tells the endocrine system this body is still in use.
That's fascinating, because so many patients think their hormones are beyond their control, or they're told that decline is just natural aging. But what you're saying reframes it. Hormones are responsive, not fixed.
Yes, and responsive to far more than we realize. For instance, strength training can increase testosterone. Certain fats, like those in sardines or sesame, support estrogen metabolism, and mindfulness practices like deep breathing or qigong can lower cortisol, which, when chronically high, contributes to bone loss. Hormones don't exist in a vacuum. They mirror our habits. And I've seen 80-year-olds rebalance their profiles without a single pill.
So the internal chemistry is just as moldable as muscle or mobility?
Absolutely. Bones listen to hormones the way trees listen to weather. They adapt constantly, but if the signals are chaotic or absent, the system breaks down. Consistency is what re-establishes rhythm.
That's a powerful metaphor, because I think people are tired of being told their bodies are broken. What they need to hear is that the system still works. It just needs clearer instructions. And that brings us to the next piece, inflammation. Because even with great movement and strong hormones, chronic inflammation can quietly sabotage everything else.
Yes, inflammation is the quiet thief of bone health. It doesn't announce itself loudly, but it erodes stability from within. When inflammation is chronic, driven by processed foods, poor sleep, stress, or even low-grade infections, it interferes with the body's ability to build. The cells responsible for forming bone slow down, while those that break bone down speed up. Over time, this imbalance creates not only weaker bones, but also more fragile joints, slower healing, and higher fall risk. That's why in my clinic we always assess markers of systemic inflammation before starting any bone protocol. Because if the fire is still burning underneath, no structure can truly be rebuilt.
That gives such a different lens to the process. It's not just about adding calcium or exercising more. It's about quieting the internal noise, which makes me wonder, where do you usually see that inflammation come from first?
The gut is a major source, particularly when the microbiome is imbalanced, but also unresolved infections in the mouth, like gum disease. Poor sleep is another major trigger, often overlooked, and so is loneliness, which research now links directly to chronic inflammation. These aren't small things. They set the baseline for how the body allocates energy toward healing or toward defense. And when you're constantly in defense mode, the bones pay the price.
It's humbling to realize how interconnected all of this is.
Yes, bones are not just structural. They are storytellers, reflecting the sum of our choices, emotions, and environments. And inflammation is the static that distorts the message.
I love that, because it means healing isn't just mechanical, it's personal. I've had patients who made just a few small changes, a cleaner breakfast, a regular bedtime, short morning walks, and within weeks, their pain lessened, their posture improved. It wasn't magic, it was the absence of interference. Which brings us, I think, to the final but maybe most underestimated factor of all, belief. Because nothing changes if someone doesn't believe their body still can.
Yes, belief changes biology. I've seen patients with similar scans and symptoms take entirely different paths. One deteriorates, the other rebuilds. The difference is often not in their bones, but in their mindset. When someone believes they are fragile, they move less, eat less, engage less. But when they believe healing is possible, they begin sending signals of life to every cell. This isn't optimism, it's physiology. Confidence changes posture, breath, digestion, and hormones. And bones, being alive, respond to all of it.
That's the most hopeful part of this entire conversation. Because belief is free. It's the one medicine anyone can start today.
Exactly, and it's often the one people forget to take, which is why every plan I give, no matter how scientific, begins with reminding the person of what is still possible.
One of my patients comes to mind, a woman in her 80s who'd lost her husband, her balance, and most of her independence. She began with just 10 minutes a day. Slowly, her walks extended, her meals became more intentional, and her voice, once quiet with hesitation, returned with strength. What she rebuilt wasn't just bone, it was momentum, purpose, and life. Which brings us naturally to our final chapter. For anyone ready to take action now, what does a day of true bone nourishment actually look like?
Yes, good idea. Shall we walk through a full daily eating routine, John? That way our listeners can save this part and return to it anytime they feel unsure about what and when to eat for their bones. A kind of roadmap they can carry with them, especially on days when motivation is low or confusion creeps in. Because habits are easier to follow when you have a model. And this one, I hope, will offer both clarity and confidence.
Good idea. If you're listening now, grab a notepad or just bookmark this part, because we're about to build your daily routine, one nourishing step at a time. Ready when you are, doctor. Let's begin with the morning.
The first 2 hours of your day are like the foundation of a house. Everything else rests on how you begin. Before food, I encourage patients to drink a warm glass of water with lemon or a dash of sea salt. This gently stimulates the digestive system, hydrates tissues, and begins mineral signaling. After that, movement comes before the meal, even if it's only 5 minutes of slow stretches or walking outside. It wakes the metabolism, increases blood flow to the gut, and reduces post-meal glucose spikes. When it comes to breakfast itself, I lean toward simplicity and warmth. A small bowl of miso soup with tofu, chopped scallion, and seaweed. It delivers protein, probiotics, iodine, and warmth, all of which support the gut and endocrine system.
That's far from the cold cereal and coffee routine most people start with. I imagine the warmth plays a role too. It's not just nutrients, but temperature, texture, and tone.
Exactly. In traditional Japanese medicine, we say cold weakens the digestive fire. A warm, savory breakfast tells the body it is safe, supported, and ready to engage. You might pair that soup with a small bowl of fermented brown rice and natto, rich in K2, iron, and complete plant protein. Many people struggle with the smell or texture of natto at first, but when prepared properly, with the mustard, scallions, or even a bit of grated daikon, it becomes not only tolerable, but enjoyable. For those who prefer variety, soft-boiled eggs or a spoon of sesame paste over rice offer alternatives. The key is this: breakfast should not feel rushed, nor should it be overdone. A few deliberate bites, chewed fully, do more for your bones than a large meal eaten distractedly.
So even at breakfast, you're already sending messages to the bones through movement, warmth, and pace.
Yes, the body is always listening, and breakfast, if done right, tells the body, I am nourished, I am safe, I can rebuild.
That is a radical shift, because we tend to view breakfast as a chore or a rush. But what you're describing sounds like ceremony, a way to ground the day with intention. I've had patients who never changed their medications or added supplements, but simply shifted how they started their day, and their inflammation dropped, energy improved, and labs began shifting. Let's carry that momentum forward. What happens next? Mid-morning before lunch.
Mid-morning is when the body begins translating breakfast into energy and repair. But it's also a time when many people, especially those with blood sugar imbalances, start to feel a drop in focus or energy. That's why I recommend a deliberate pause around 10:30 or 11, not just for food, but for rhythm. A small snack, maybe a handful of pumpkin seeds, a few slices of apple, or a spoon of unsweetened yogurt with ground sesame can keep minerals steady and inflammation low. But it's not just what you eat, it's what you pair it with. This is the perfect window for a 15-minute walk, ideally outdoors, uneven ground, natural light, and a slow, curious pace. Wake up the nervous system and remind the bones they are in use. And this rhythm, John, is where momentum builds.
It's fascinating how much emphasis you place on environment and mood. I've seen patients improve more from walking in a garden than from hours on a treadmill. And that explains why bone health is deeply tied to presence, not just performance.
Yes, because presence turns small actions into medicine. In Japan, many seniors walk to the store daily, not because it's faster, but because it keeps their joints loaded and their circulation flowing. A snack of soaked walnuts or a miso broth in a thermos, followed by climbing a small hill or stepping over stones, does more than people realize. These micro strains, these light disruptions, keep the bones adapting. And when combined with trace minerals from whole snacks, you're not just avoiding bone loss. You're sending growth signals. For those who are less mobile, even standing on one foot near a table or practicing deep belly breathing can engage the skeletal muscle axis. Bones do not demand extremes, they respond to intention.
It's comforting, actually, because so many people feel they need to go hard to make progress, and they end up injured or discouraged.
Sustainability is strength, and strength begins with honoring your current capacity, then expanding gently from there.
Those words matter. I hope everyone listening takes that to heart, because small steps, repeated daily, don't stay small. They grow bones, calm the mind, and rebuild trust in your body. Now let's keep this going. What about lunch?
Lunch is your anchor meal, the moment when the digestive fire is strongest and the body is primed to absorb nutrients. For this reason, I encourage making it the most substantial meal of the day. A balanced plate could include a warm vegetable stew made with burdock root, carrots, and onions simmered in dashi broth. Pair that with a grilled piece of salmon or mackerel rich in omega-3s and vitamin D. On the side, a serving of Shigeaki or wakame seaweed, lightly dressed with sesame oil and vinegar, offers iodine, calcium, and magnesium. Fermented pickles and a half bowl of rice, ideally sprouted or mixed with millet, round out the meal. It's colorful, textured, and deeply grounding. And most importantly, it's eaten sitting down in silence or soft conversation, never rushed.
There's a spiritual calm to how you frame meals. It's more than nutrition. It's care, presence, and attention. I imagine the body responds not just to the food, but to the pace of the moment.
Exactly. When we eat with calm, our vagus nerve activates, digestion improves, and inflammation drops. It becomes a full-body cue that says, you are not in danger, you are safe to build. For those who are plant-based, tofu or tempeh with a citrus ponzu glaze can replace fish, and the seaweed remains vital. Even a simple lentil soup with greens and a miso side can be deeply nourishing. Avoid drinking cold water during meals, as it can dampen enzymatic activity and take 20 to 30 minutes to eat. Chewing thoroughly, even counting your chews if needed, turns lunch into a signal, not just a stop.
I've never heard anyone say lunch is a signal, but now I can't stop thinking about it that way.
Everything we do either whispers strength to our bones or slowly takes it away. Lunch, done properly, whispers loudly.
That concept reframes the entire meal. We're not just feeding hunger, we're casting a vote for vitality. And that makes me think, what if someone struggles with fatigue or cravings a few hours later? What's the best mid-afternoon support that still honors bone health?
Afternoons can be deceptive. We often confuse thirst or emotional fatigue for hunger. So the first step is always a glass of warm water or herbal tea. Then, if the body still asks for nourishment, offer it something stabilizing. A slice of sweet potato with a dab of tahini, a small bowl of black sesame porridge, rich in calcium and healthy fats. Or roasted edamame, lightly salted, which brings protein and crunch without a sugar crash. This snack should feel like a gentle hand, not a jolt. And again, this is a good time for movement. A light stretch, a walk to the mailbox, or standing up and rolling the shoulders, because circulation is the courier of nutrients, and we want delivery to the bones.
That's beautifully put. Circulation as a courier. And you're right. This is often the moment of the day when people reach for sugar, caffeine, or give up entirely. But you're saying a different rhythm is possible.
Yes, because the body wants rhythm more than it wants stimulation. When we create predictable anchors, hydration, protein, and movement, we calm the endocrine system. Cortisol stabilizes, blood sugar evens out. The bones, which are exquisitely tuned to stress, receive the message that resources are available. Afternoon fatigue, in this light, is not a flaw. It's an invitation to realign with the body's tempo instead of overriding it.
And I imagine this kind of consistent calm helps with sleep as well?
Absolutely. By managing midday energy dips gently, we reduce evening surges of adrenaline that often interrupt rest.
That makes so much sense. I've seen patients who were exhausted all day but couldn't sleep at night, and no one ever looked at how they handled their afternoons. This changes everything. So let's close out the day. What does an ideal dinner look like? And how should it differ from lunch?
Dinner is your exhale. Where lunch is the body's engine, dinner is the signal to slow down, repair, and prepare for rest. I suggest keeping it warm, light, and deeply mineral-rich. Think of a clear soup with daikon, shiitake mushrooms, and a piece of soft tofu, gentle on the stomach, but full of trace nutrients. A side of steamed greens like komatsuna or spinach dressed with sesame or a touch of miso supports calcium and magnesium needs, and a small portion of rice or barley grounds the nervous system, helping the body feel safe enough to sleep. For those who enjoy fish, a piece of broiled white fish like cod or haddock can offer lean protein without heaviness. But more than what you eat, it's when and how. Eat at least 2 hours before bed and take time afterward to walk or stretch gently.
So you're saying the evening meal should almost mimic the body's transition from action to restoration. That's a shift for many listeners who might eat late or heavy and then go straight to bed. But I've also noticed those are the people who wake up stiff, foggy, or inflamed.
Exactly, John. A late, dense dinner forces the body to digest when it should be regenerating. Bones need deep sleep to respond to all the signals we've given them during the day. And that regeneration starts with quiet food, quiet rituals. A cup of chamomile or roasted barley tea after dinner can further support digestion and reduce cortisol. It's not about deprivation. It's about allowing the body to fully enter repair mode.
That's such a powerful reframe. We think of dinner as reward, but really, it's a ritual of returning to the body, to safety, to stillness.
And from that stillness, we build strength. Night is when your bones do their deepest work, if we let them.
It changes how I think about the entire day. Meals as signals, movement as dialogue, rest as medicine. And it makes me wonder, for someone who's just now realizing they've spent years sending the wrong signals, where do they start?
They start by listening, truly listening. Not with fear, not with guilt, but with curiosity. The body doesn't hold grudges. Even after years of neglect, it responds to care quickly. Begin with the one thing, a nourishing breakfast, a mindful walk, or a quiet evening meal. Then do it again. Bones don't demand perfection. They crave consistency. And with each repeated gesture, you rewrite the story your body is living.
So many people need to hear that, because they're not just rebuilding density, they're rebuilding trust. Trust in their body and in their ability to shape their future. And that brings us to something I'd love to close with, a kind of message, if you will. What would you say to someone listening now, maybe 68, maybe 78, who's been told it's too late?
I would say this: it is not too late. It is right on time. The body is not a machine that wears down. It is a garden, and gardens bloom when they are tended, regardless of the season. I've seen women in their 70s and men in their 80s turn bone scans around. But more than that, I've seen them reclaim their pace, their posture, their voice, not because of miracles, but because they return to rhythm. You don't have to do everything. You only have to begin and then continue.
That's the medicine we often forget, the slow, hopeful kind. The kind that grows quietly until one day we stand up straighter, we breathe easier, and we stop fearing the future. Thank you, Dr. Hinohara, not just for your wisdom, but for showing us that longevity isn't about avoiding age. It's about embracing it fully.